So here you are, you made your little web page. It looks cool, it looks clean, but there is one small problem. It is still very boring. But don't worry, I got you covered. So tada! On this small little website over here, shout out to them, I found this cool little cursor. Now you might be thinking, okay, this is not as cool as I was expecting it to be, but wait, there is more. When you hover it over something, it looks like it is revealing something underneath the main layer of the web page, and that is what we'll be making today. Okay, so here you are in your code, go to your HTML and create a div, the class name and ID of cursor. Next, go to your CSS and we'll start styling this cursor div. Firstly, you need to give it a position of fixed because we want it to stay relatively fixed to the viewport and not move outside it. Next, we need a height of 50 pixels. Let's give it a width of 50 pixels. Now it is a perfect square. Now we will give it a border radius of 100% to make it a perfect circle. Next, we need to give it a background color of white so that it is visible on our screen. And here you have it. Here's your white circular div. It does not have to be a circle. You can make it a triangle. You can add a cool clip path to make it look like a weird polygon. You can do whatever, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm going with a white circle. Okay, so now you have the div. Now you need to make sure it follows the movement of your mouse. As I said in my previous sentences, we need to follow the movements of the mouse. You add a window dot event listener, and the event we will be listening to is the mouse move event, and we will capture all its information inside this e parameter and we'll pass it to an arrow function. Let's log and see what information this mouse event is providing us. So here in your browser, when you move your mouse around, nothing happens. But if you go to your inspect panel and go to your console, you can see every time you move your mouse, a lot of things are actually happening. Basically, every time you move your mouse, the mouse event is being logged to the console. So let's see what's inside. So inside we have a lot of key value pairs, but the ones we need is the ones we need to figure out first. So to figure that out, let's understand some concepts. So this is your viewport. It is not divided, but it is a 2D plane, so you can have an x-axis and a y-axis. Basically, we need to find the respective x-coordinate and y-coordinate of our mouse in the viewport, and then we can assign those positions to our white div over there, and it will basically follow the movements of the mouse. So in our mouse movement event, we can see that we have this client X and client Y property. There are plenty of other properties that have the x-axis and y-axis, but for simplicity's sake, we will go with the client X and client Y. I won't be explaining, you can Google it, but we'll be using these two. Okay, coming back to the JavaScript, all you need to do is firstly get your cursor div that you created earlier in JavaScript using document.getElementById. Give it the ID of cursor. Now you have the cursor div here, you can access this. What you need to do is manipulate the style object inside cursor. So we'll go cursor.style, and can you guess which property we'll be modifying? If you can't, that's fine, but if you did, yes, first property is top. Good for you, you understood. Open a string literal, give it the value of e.clientX, which is basically the clientX property inside our mouse event, and we will assign it a unit of pixels. That is fine. Next is cursor.style.left. This will be for the, oh wait a second, I made a mistake. It's not supposed to be client X, it is supposed to be client Y. Because top to bottom is y-axis and we need to give it the y value. Next, we'll give the left to right a value of e.clientX, again in pixels. Now, according to this code and according to my understanding, that white div should be following our cursor's movements. And that is exactly what it is doing. It is following our cursor's movement. However, there are some differences as compared to our inspiration. So let's go back to that. So as you can see, the first thing is the cursor is in the middle of the white circular div. So that's the first thing we need to do. So as you can see, the cursor is in the center of the white circular div, and it is following the cursor with a little bit of delay. So we need to figure that part out. So come back to our code. I think for making it centralized, all we need to do is give it a margin of left. I think minus 22 pixels will be enough since the height and width are 50 pixels each. And same way margin top will be minus 22 pixels. That should bring it to the center of the white div. And as you can see, our cursor is pretty much at the center of this div over here. So that is sorted. Next part is adding that little bit of delay effect. Come back to your JavaScript. Let's do some noob level JavaScript over here. What I'll do is I will wrap this code in a set timeout function. I know this is probably not the best way to do it, but hey, if it works, it works. We'll give it like 50 milliseconds, and then we'll paste this code over here. So now, after our cursor has moved, with a delay of 50 milliseconds, the white circular div should follow our cursor. So let's check it out. And yes, it is working, and it is working fine. Actually, I think we can even reduce it, but that is up to you if you want to increase or decrease this delay. But it looks pretty fine, it looks pretty smooth. Next thing we need to do is add that little hover effect that reveals that little layer underneath. Okay, so coming back to the CSS, the first thing we'll do, we'll give it a Z index of like I think 1000, so that it stays above everything else. Next thing, we need to give it a backdrop filter of, let's say, grayscale 1. This is more of an optional choice. I will tell you why it's optional later on. Next thing we need to do, let's give it a mix blend mode of difference. This is basically so that the thing behind it is visible. And the next thing we're going to add is the pointer events of none, so that it does not interfere with anything else that we are clicking on the screen. Let's go back and check it out if it works. And there you have it. There's the effect. Your white little div is following your cursor. If you hover it over something, it is doing exactly as we intended it to do. It looks like it is revealing a hidden underneath layer, which is of a different color than the upper layer of the web page. And if you hover it over this div, it also looks quite cool. But however, I think we are still missing one effect from our inspiration that we took from the other website. So let's go check it out. And here we can see the cursor, the white div is a normal size. When we hover it over something, the size increases. So for this last little effect, we'll first go to our CSS. We'll copy this cursor selector from here, paste it down here, append the active class to it. You can name it anything. I like to name it active. And we'll give it a scale of, let's say, 1.2 times the original size. So now the thing is, when do we want to add this active class to the cursor div? In our HTML, I want this box to be the target element. Whenever I hover over the box, the active class should be added. This should be very easy to do in JavaScript. All we need to do is use the mouse event again. If e.target.id is equal to box, which is the ID I gave to that box element, just add cursor.classList add active, else cursor.classList.remove active, and this should do the trick. Let's go check it out. It is doing the trick, but it is not noticeable. The first thing is that the scale is too small, so let's go back to the CSS and make it like 1.5 times maybe. Now you can see the scale is a lot more visible. When you hover over the div, it becomes bigger. When you hover off, it becomes smaller. However, we need to make it smoother, and for that we can go to this lovely website over here, easings.net. You don't need to do this necessarily. I'm doing this because I want a smoother effect. We'll go to this ease in out expo, and I'll copy the cubic bezier function. Yes, I do not know how to write cubic bezier functions. Okay, kill me. Okay, so coming back to the CSS, here we are going to add the transition property. Let's add it to transform. Let's give it about 0.2 seconds, and let's paste the cubic bezier function. I went back and I picked up a different cubic bezier function because I like this one better. Also here, rather than directly using scale, we'll be using transform, and then give it, try and give it the scale property, and let's give it 1.5 times, right? It was 1.5. Let's go check it out if it is smoother now. And there you go. It is a lot smoother now. It is doing the trick. It is doing exactly what it's supposed to. And remember I said earlier that you don't have to necessarily use the grayscale function. Well, I'll tell you why. If you go back and you remove the grayscale function from here, it then gives you different kind of colors, which is something you might want, which is something you might not want. I like the grayscale better. This is also better, but if you're going for some kind of a dark website, I think the grayscale option is better, or you can use this one without the grayscale, which is also kind of nice. So that is it for today's tutorial. If you want the If you want the code to this, it will be available on my GitHub. The link will be down in the description. And if you're there, you mind dropping a little star on my repository. Your boy is trying to get that all-star achievement on GitHub. That is it. If you want this to be made in React or something, you can leave a comment down below saying React please, and I will make a React component for it and leave a link down in the description. That is it for today's tutorial. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like the video, and that is it. Bye bye.